I thought I'd do this video. It wasn't something I had planned, but it's just things that I've just noticed of the last, well, years or even recently. And it's about media agenda and how they want certain things to fail and certain things to succeed, and how they don't want people to think for themselves in regards of whether something is good or bad. So this is going to be kind of in stages, so kind of bear with me. So I'll try to get this out as quick as I can, and try not to make the video too long. Now, for those of you who live in the UK, we saw the stuff with Gary Lineker, and where he said his post on immigration on Twitter. Now, whether you agree or disagree with it, people have freedom of speech and they're entitled to it. So it depends. So it's all whether what your viewpoint is on it. And we saw papers like the Daily Mail, basically, as what papers and media outlets like that do, is get a story and then completely blow it out of proportion, in the sense that, for example, that they, instead of if they were actually printing what he actually said, then you could sit there and then you could formulate an opinion on whether you disagree or whether you agree with his views. And as long as it's done in a constructive and an adult way, then, you know, things can be discussed. But then what did they do? They took what he said and they misinterpreted. So, for example, they said what he said and they used the word Nazi, which we know is a nasty and a horrible word in a sense of what those group of people did, which obviously I'm not going to give you a history lesson on that. And then the thing is that when you read what he actually said, he said Germans. But then what did the Daily Mail do? They said, oh, he said that he was comparing the immigration bill to what the government were doing, like Nazis. He didn't actually say that. He was comparing it to the German rhetoric that was going on, that was happening. Now, as far as I know, Germans and Nazis are two completely different things. But you see how what ended up happening is that papers like that, like the Daily Mail and the other papers, well, the right-wing ones, sat there, and where we're living in problems with the energy crisis and people wanting better pay, which they should be focusing on, that's what their whole what they were doing on the newspapers for days and days and days and days. Obviously because they didn't like what he said. You know, that's not exactly what he said. They wanted him cancelled. And as well, you've got more important things going on, and that's what they did. Now, long story short, the media sat there and said that Lineker stepped down voluntarily. But then hours later, you find out that what he didn't. It was the BBC that told him, that suspended him until they decided to do what they were going to, how they're going to deal with the matter. Now, as far as I know, and maybe it's just my brain, that's two different stories. But then nobody questions it because people won't, because it's an agenda, right? So then we sit there and we go through all this stuff, and then obviously Match of the Day and the rest of the other BBC presenters and stuff join in and say, look, we're not going to sit there and we're not going to present it or do enough to do it. So then they ended up having to do Match of the Day and Match of the Day 2 with just the football footage with no commentary and no football pundits. And then days later, they ended up apologising to Gary Lineker and ended up putting him back inside, obviously he's back to him doing his job again. Right? This could have been solved, right? Because as what happened is the Daily Mail sat there and did with the story. All they had to do is, if they basically all they had to do was not, if they never sat there even put the story on there, and then obviously Lineker had already put his comments on Twitter, all that would have happened was that people just would have ignored it, and then people would have just moved on, because nobody would have given it a blind, bitter notice, because they just would have carried on. But you know that what people do is that they just want to whip up a frenzy, whip up people being outraged, and as I said before, the council culture as we see happen in the media, and obviously with social media now, obviously that's 24 hours these days. And then obviously since he's been reinstated now, no one's talking about it now because nobody cares, because people have moved on. And then this something out of nothing could have easily sat there and been dealt with if the story if they just left the story alone, and everybody would have been none the wiser. And now the Daily Mail aren't even talking about it like it never happened. So you see how people sit there and how people can create stuff out of nothing. Then there's the usual thing, another thing where when it comes to video games, where I've done this, where I've joked around on Twitter, where every week it's the usual Nintendo drama. Now, I'm not defending companies when they do things that are wrong, because they all do, and they all need to be held accountable when they do stuff. But every week, as regular as clockwork on social media, there's this Nintendo outrage about something. And it's like, again, everybody feels like they have to be outraged and upset about absolutely nothing. Some of it completely stupid. And so, for example, with the sequel to Breath of the Wild, the price they've announced that the game's going to be $70, or probably work in the UK. That'll probably be 70 quid anyway, all roughly. Now, I'm gonna sit there and say right off the bat that $70 for a game is too expensive. Now, if they were sitting there and giving you, if they were sitting there and were charging you £70 or $70, and you were getting, and then instead of having to pay for the Game Pass, it was a part of the package where you pay the $70, and any future DLC that was added to the game, you effectively don't have to sit there and pay for it now, because that's part of the $70 package. Then I will turn and say, you know what, mate, it's still a high price to pay, but when you break it down, it's kind of worth it. But you're still having to pay the $70, and you still have to sit there and still pay the Game Pass, that's why things like Tekken 7, which I haven't played yet. I bought the standard edition version, not the deluxe version, because I got it really cheap, brand new. One of the reasons why and it's same with Street Fighter 5, why I've stopped with those things now, is that I am not paying for all the DLC, because why do you pay for that? It's really expensive. Then they keep releasing a new version of it where it's got all the characters in it, then another version, right? Anyway, so yeah, I do agree, $70 for the game is far too expensive for any game. Now, look at now everybody getting outraged, saying, oh, the next New Zelda game coming out in May. Too expensive, $70, that's far too expensive. But yet, everybody seems to forget that Sony were the first company that were charging the $70 for the actual for the actual games, which again was too much, right? And then Microsoft and Nintendo weren't putting up the prices of their games and obviously and their consoles. And all they were doing is that all they were doing was watching to see what would happen. Now, people again were a little bit outraged, but nobody sat there and really said a lot, because it's Sony. And before anyone says something, I am a Sony fan because I've had every single console currently with the PS5. So I've got, and I love all the Sony games. So I'm just sitting there and calling it as it is. And people will sit there acting a little bit outraged, but there wasn't that much outrage over it, right? There was a little, but not that much, like they do with Nintendo drama. What did people do? They still went out there and bought the games at $70, because Sony knew that people would sit there, would get upset, would get outraged, but they would still sit there and buy the games anyway. And all that happened was Microsoft and Nintendo saw it and thought, okay, Sony have sat there, put the price of their games up, people are complaining, but they're still going to sit there and they're still going to pay. So then what do? They then follow suit, and then do exactly the same thing. Now, if, say example, people had sat there and followed their conviction and said, you know what, I'm not paying £70, $70 for a game, and the game's underperformed. What would have happened is Sony would have had to have backtracked, and then Nintendo and Microsoft probably wouldn't have raised the price of their games. But they know that it's a lot of money. They know people are going to complain, but they know people are going to buy them. Right? So again, as I said before, pardon me, you get people outraged, they don't do nothing. As I said before, I miss the days when in the gaming industry it was not like that. Obviously it was a little bit different because we didn't have like 24-hour social media, because I remember back in the day when it was mostly magazines. God, I miss those days of Game Pro and EGM, and every month in the UK there was a certain places where I could import, they used to import those magazines and buy them, and I remember the EGM magazines used to be really thick. I even remember the glossy paper. I miss those days. But I know that it was a different time because we didn't kind of have that. But as for people are outraged. Now, another thing about what was going on about agenda is, I'll give you an example about what I mean. IGN years ago reviewed the game Alien Isolation and gave it a low mark. And part of the reason why is because one of the reviews at the time thought that they were gonna do a like a run and gun first person shooter, and so then they gave the game a low mark simply just because it's a survival horror. Now, the game is hard and it has problems here and there, but nothing too much to kind of ruin the actual game itself. Now, if I had followed suit in not trying it out for myself and maybe thinking to myself I might like it, I never would have got round to sit there and playing the game, because I would have looked and think, okay, someone said the game is bad, so I'm not going to sit there and play it. I know at one point it was on Game Pass and it's been taken off now, but nevertheless, when I bought it and I played it on PS4 and I got it second hand, so I never paid full price for the game anyway. And I played it, and obviously it's survival horror, and as I said before, it's not without its problems here and there, but I actually enjoyed it. It's a hard game, but once you sit there and you get the hang of it and you clock the game, it's kind of very rewarding in terms of or how the game is. But again, if I'd listened completely to what somebody had said, I never would have tried it out, because as soon as somebody puts a goal, bad, that's crap, bad, crap, bad, I never would have sat there and tried it out, or try it whether or not I might like it. Sometimes you can have a game where it's not completely great, and maybe you won't pay, you wouldn't pay full price for it. But if you sit there and see it at a heavily discounted price, you'll think to yourself, right, I'll play it. Another example, I'm a massive Assassin's Creed fan, and obviously we know about the problems with Assassin's Creed Unity. They've all been very ambitious with the games, and there were bugs here and there. Now, when I played it, yes, I did see those bugs in it. There were one or two problems where I had to do one of the missions again because it wasn't, it kind of ruined the mission, so we had to redo it. But I didn't mind it so much because the fact that I was enjoying the game. Now, am I going to lie and say that was it annoying having to redo it? Yeah, but I wouldn't say it was necessarily game breaking, where it kind of totally ruined the game. Now, as soon as people sit there and put out and go, bad, crap, it's terrible, what happens? People don't buy it. Now, we could go into another video about the Assassin's Creed franchise having problems here and there, and I might actually do that in another video in the future. But it was actually quite a good game, and I actually really liked it. If you took it for what it was, although I got the game for free, but I won't say how. But nevertheless, I liked it. It was a good game, and if I listen to some people, bug, terrible. I never would have got to play the game and then actually enjoy it. And I actually enjoyed it for what it was. I'm not going to say it's my favourite one, but for me playing it, and in terms of enjoying the game, and especially the era it was set in Renaissance France, really enjoyed it. But again, as I thought, the media put out something, crap, bad, don't buy, people don't, and then some of it fails. We see it in the UK with football or soccer across the world, but over here in the UK, we call it football. You see media outlets where they're biased. For example, like they'll get a certain big, the really, really big teams, the one who've got a big history and who have a recent history of still winning things for over the decades and over the years. But then they go for a bad period. Like you've had like Manchester United, where they had where they used to be dominant, but then I know they won a cup just the other day. I think the Carabao Cup. But in general, they've had problems where ever since Alex Ferguson retired, they've had gone through managers, and obviously because of Manchester United's history and their pedigree, the expectation of them being successful was a lot higher than, say, if you're a Tottenham or a West Ham or an Everton fan, for example. So that's kind of understandable. But what I've noticed is that when certain big teams haven't done very well, or they've gone through so much drama, the media will talk about it. But again, they're not really going to sit there and kind of really kind of slay to them over it, because they're just bootlicking them. But then when it's a smaller company, when it's a smaller football club, right, for argument's sake, they'll just keep going on and on and on and on and on and on about it, because it's almost to a point where they have this agenda as if that they want that club to fail. And then they lose their manager, and then they'll make a story. So it's a breaking news. So-and-so manager has been sacked, and all that. So now there's certain big players now want to leave, and they've been courted by this big other sides, and they want certain sides to fail. Now, me as a football fan, yeah, I support, for example, my team Tottenham, and so I'm obviously going to want my club to do. To be successful more than the other clubs, because that's who I support. But there was a time when I used to watch all football, and then because I just enjoyed it as a football fan, even though I was a Tottenham fan, but I enjoyed watching it. I would watch every single football game that was being that used to broadcast every week, because I just simply loved the game, even though I'm a Tottenham supporter. But then when you start to see some of these commentators sitting there and being biased and wanting something to be successful or fail, you think it's just off-putting. We just want to sit there and just want to enjoy and watch the actual game itself. Again, some of these media outlets are just biased, and it just totally takes you out of enjoying the football as somebody who's a football fan that just wants to sit there and enjoy and watch football. And for me, that's what's kind of taken me out of it, although it has been frustrating with my team with the way they've been performing and not winning games and cups, but then that's a whole different story. Anyway, and then the final point is with the media is when it comes to movies, there seems to be this kind of agenda where media outlets want certain companies to do well and certain other companies to fail on purpose, or they don't focus so heavily. So, for example, you have DC Comics and Marvel, and people know my history, where I've said a million times before that I'm a comic book fan. I've been collecting comics for over 40 years. Even when people were making fun of me for being a geek or a nerd for collecting comics, the t-shirts, whatever, the models and the toys, I used to get bullied and made fun of. Now it's fashionable to love comics and superhero stuff. But anyway, that's a whole different matter. So I'm only showing you that I don't sit there and I don't take sides when it comes to Marvel or DC, because I want, or even Image, because there's loads of other comic book publications out there. But as a real comic book fan, you want everything to be successful, even though sometimes that's not always the case. That's what happens. I mean, that's just how life is when things don't do as well as what they should. But as I said before, But what I've noticed, and yeah, I've already done videos on stuff to do with DC, where DC haven't been great with some of it. Some stuff has been good, some of it's been bad, some of it's been okay. But as we know, the problems have been to that. It's just to do with, for me, with having you have a plan. And what I'm about to say in regards of what's going on with Marvel, wrongly or rightly, in whether or not you think the Marvel movies haven't been as good as they once were. One thing you could say about Marvel over DC is they have a plan in what they wanted to do. So you map out the basic superheroes, then you expand. DC just haven't done that, and they've been in problems ever since. Now that obviously they've got James Gunn in charge, hopefully this will be the case. So where am I going with this? What really gets at my goal is when a DC film comes out, you see a lot of these media outlets on social media. Again, I think that's what's ruining things, I think, in general, and I don't think it's healthy, is that when these media outlets want a film to fail, and they'll go, oh no, it's bad, rubbish, it's terrible, don't go watch it, we're going to review bomb it, bad, terrible, we'll pick it apart. And then when they do it with a Marvel film, they don't do it as much, even when those particular ones maybe don't do as well. Now, there was a time years ago where what I used to do is when it used to come to reviewing movies, is that I used to write, whether it was on the internet or on magazines, if a magazine or whoever it was sat there and said this movie is not very good, it's crap, I wouldn't bother with that particular movie. I would believe exactly what they said was gospel. And I understand that, like going to see you don't want to waste your money in seeing a film that could be bad, so you feel like you're wasting your money. And especially now in this day and age, whether it's seeing a movie in a cinema or even renting one out through streaming services, unless you have to rent it, not when it's on there for free, it could be a lot of money, so you don't want to waste your money. So I kind of get that. But for me, what I started doing is that I thought to myself, you know what, I am not gonna sit there and listen to what somebody what thinks of the movie. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna judge a movie for myself, whether or not that means me taking a chance of getting my money and then going to the cinemas and taking that risk, or maybe simply waiting for it to appear on a streaming service or buying it secondhand. That's what I'll do. And then there have been films which I can't think of at the moment where they haven't had the high, how can I quite put it? They haven't had the high promotion in advertisements to say, oh, this movie is going to be is a blockbuster, it's going to be fantastic. And the movie's actually been really, really, really good. And because it's not a big budget, maybe even indie-like kind of a thing, it doesn't kind of get the same accolades as a big blockbuster summer Hollywood movie. But that has happened. You sit there and leave it. So as I said before, Marvel. Now I'm gonna sit there and I'm gonna be really honest, and I know people are not gonna like this, but I'm gonna sit there and be really, really honest. I don't think the Marvel movies, since during Phase 4, have been that great. I'm going to sit there a minute. There's been one or two others that have they've been enjoyable, but they've not had the same kind of a caliber as the early phases of the Marvel movies. I would sit there and I would even say that probably the last time that we had something of that caliber, aside from the last Spider-Man movie, was probably Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. And that was only because of obviously the scale of the movie, because obviously I have to split it into two because it was so big in terms of what going on. All the heroes all teaming up in one epic saga. And that was probably the last time they've been really, really good. Now, you look at movies like Black Widow, which to me they should have done years ago. Because I remember seeing Captain America Winter Soldier, and they made that kind of like it was like a spy thriller movie. And obviously that's when we see more of Black Widow. And I think if they'd done it then with that character, I think it would have been a lot better. And they left it, and that movie didn't do very well. Then there was drama regarding that particular movie, right? Now, the media talked about it, but they soon very quickly just forgot about it. Then you had movies like The Eternals, where I didn't mind it. The actual cinematographer is really great, but I forgot about it. The movie's just boring. Same thing again. Once I sat there, and then people didn't really kind of like it, and it was decisive. Nobody sits there, nobody talks about it. Shock horror. Starting out as a pattern. Then you had Doctor Strange 2, which I enjoyed it, but I was expecting a lot more from it, in the sense of I thought we were going to see more of the multiverse being featured in the actual movie, but it didn't sit there, and it didn't really kind of dwell on the multiverse too long. And I would love to have seen more of it. Now the cameos that they had in it from one of the multiverses was actually really good. But aside from that, enjoyable movie, but to me a little bit disappointing, but I still enjoyed it. I'm trying to figure out. And then you had the Thor Love and Thunder. Again, for me, not a great movie at all. It's only towards the end of it where obviously the action was pretty good, but even the CGI in it was a bit ropey in places, right? And then that got mixed reviews. But again, nobody sits there, nobody talks about it now. Everyone's kind of done with that now, so that's kind of like moved on. Then you've got movies like Ant-Man 3. Again, I haven't seen that, so when it appears on Disney Plus, which it will in the next couple two months or two, I will check it out and see what I think of it. But again, that didn't do whatever. People will complain about the story. People apparently have said that the villain in it was really great. But again, I heard the movie wasn't great. Again, I will judge it for myself. As soon as it hit the second week, it totally dropped off. Guess what? Nobody sits there and says anything. Now they did, again, as I said before, they did report on it, right, about it dropping off the second week. But no one's, but you noticed it started to notice a pattern where nobody's focused on it now. I mean, you notice this pattern with these Marvel movies where they haven't done very well, been mixed reviews, or they've underperformed, and then they talk about it once in an article, that's it. And then when it's a DC movie, they'll keep going on and on and on and on about it, because I want it to fail. Now, even with obviously James Gunn with his direction and what he's doing with his direction of it, to me, I'm gonna miss, like the original DC characters like Henry Cavill, whether or not Gal Gadot is gonna be still gonna be in it, and whether or not Jason Momoa is still gonna be Aquaman. I don't know how it's gonna turn out, but I'm still interested to see what his vision is gonna be now that he has a vision on what he wants to do. He is going to have a plan in what he's kind of going to do. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And I am interested, even though I do miss the current stuff that they were doing, because it was kind of exciting. But I'm willing to sit there and willing for things to change. But you already know that they're going to crap on it no matter what, because it's not a Marvel movie, and you already know what's going to happen. So, for example, you've got the Flash movie coming out, and yes, I was talking about this history with Ezra Miller, and I'm not going to defend the stuff he did, and hopefully he gets the right help in sorting himself out, because it's not a great thing. a not great look for him, for the company you're working for, and for himself, and especially against social media. But there have been a lot of stories, people saying, "Oh, it's the Flash movie is good. They've heard it's really great." There's even one rumor that Tom Cruise has actually seen it and really enjoyed it. And even when that rumor came out about him watching it, and he said that he actually really, people are really gonna enjoy it. You already saw some of the same media outlets, for example, Comic Book Media, saying, "Well, we should then take pictures of pinch of salt. Oh, we don't know if this is true or not." Now, would they have sat there and said this if it was a Marvel movie? They would have been sitting there and salivating and licking their lips if that had been a Marvel movie, right? And then, so that's my whole point. And what I don't like about some of these media, about the media, is that they put out their agenda and what they want to succeed and what they want to fail. And then it makes it easy for a lot of people because they don't have to sit there and they don't have to think for themselves and judging things for themselves. So, for example, you'll have a movie and then somebody will sit and go, "Crap," or even as for video games, of what we've been talking about. And somebody will sit there and say, crap. And then as soon as you sit there and you see a hashtag, whatever the movie is or video game is, what do you sit there and say? "Oh, I'm not going to watch that because it's crap. I knew it wasn't going to be very good. Oh, I knew it was going to fail." And blah, 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 blah. It's the same old kind of bullshit. And you think, surprise. And for me, that goes to another thing as to why sometimes I don't bother with social media, because one of the things that, although I do use social media, is I think a lot of people spend way too much time on it, and I think on your mental health, I think it's unhealthy to sit there to live your life on there, or to put everything of your whole life on there, because once you sit there and you do that, you become totally absorbed into it, and that's the reason why I don't really kind of bother as much now, whether it's Facebook and Twitter. You've got all these social apps. I don't WhatsApp, which no one bothers talking to me anyway, but I've got no interest in all these things anymore, because you start realizing that, especially if people aren't talking to you, so for example on WhatsApp, if people aren't talking to you, you then get upset over it because nobody sits there and wants to talk to you. So then you get upset and you start worrying and think, "Oh, why isn't anyone talking to me?" Or people are talking to you too much. And then sometimes and then I found that once I kind of disappeared from it, I found that my mental health and then I didn't care about what other people think or thought or something. So as I said before, when it comes to movies now, I don't tend to check out reviews anymore, although I do glance over them. Same thing with video games, because it's just so negative. And it's the same thing with the news, where to me it's just negative, and we're already in a problem as it is, where people are struggling, and people are just unhappy if people are just going to be honest. And then sometimes you just need to kind of switch off or do things to, like, enjoy life, rather than sitting there and living in misery and swallow. Even though it's difficult if you haven't got the money to be able to escape from all that. But that's what I found, that I try to enjoy life, and especially like I've lost family members, and you don't know for example what life is going to bring, so you have to sit there and try to take enjoyment as it is, because you don't know when your time's kind of gonna come. So it's either you sit there, you end up being negative and miserable and then being unhappy, rather than trying to do something, even if it's something little, to try and change your life, to make it a little bit more brighter. So as I said before, I've been watching a lot more of my TV shows. I'm trying to get back into reading more of my comics. I'm trying to play more of my video games, even though I really want a 4K TV to really experience them, because obviously I've got a PS5 and a Series X, and having a 4K would expand, the quality of the quality of the games that I'm already playing. Don't get me wrong, playing a 1080p is still great, but having a 4K would be extra. You're getting the full capabilities of those consoles. But I'm trying to do more things. I'm listening to more of my music now, where I'm more into like 90s and 80s music, and I'm going back and remembering tracks and favorite songs and albums that I used to listen to back in the day, and now I'm listening to them again. I'm enjoying them like I'm enjoying it for the first time. And obviously with YouTube, where I'm trying to sit there and create content now, and it's like the more subs that I get, or the more positive comments you get, it's the more that it encourages you to do more or to expand more on what you're already kind of doing. So it's all about sitting there and trying to, you know, like to do things rather than, you know. But as I said before, that's what kind of gets on my kind of nerves now. As I said, in terms of the way that people are kind of like behaving now, so to speak, and why I don't like the way these outlets sort of have got this there seems to be this complete I kind of forget the word, this cancel culture. We saw it with Star Trek, where, you know, people use things like, oh, it's woke and all this, and not just Star Trek, with anything. I've seen it with, like, even say with the Flash, where people complain, oh, I want this and I want that, and people just getting angry and being outraged. And I miss the days when, and again, I know it's because things are different because we didn't have social media, but I miss the days when there wasn't. I know people throughout time have always been angry and outraged, but for me, I find that this social media, the media and the social media in general, it's amplified the way that people's behavior is. Like, people are just angry and I want this to fail, or we manipulate people into thinking what we into what they think of it. And again, that's why I don't read newspapers anymore. Although I still know what's going on, but I don't focus on it. That's why during COVID, you know, some people would sit there and listen to the news 24/7, because I know people were worried at the time. But I found myself not doing it, because the more that you sat there and did that, the more depressed and the more worried that you started to get. And then you started to fear things. And I found that when I sat there and I tried to keep myself safe, keep myself entertained, keep my mental health, you know, I felt like as a person I was a lot more positive. But as I said before, I'm just tired of these media outlets. I've said this with places like Comic Book Marvel, and some of these other even some of these right-wing YouTubers that do it as well, where they put out a agenda and they get outraged over something. And as I said before, we've just gone on with DC and Marvel, with people wanting things to fail. And as I said before, for me, it's never been about picking sides, because even when it came to consoles, I grew up with Nintendo, and I did want to play Sega games, but I couldn't. It's like at the end of the day, it's that you had to pick one console, and you could only afford one certain console to play. And then, obviously, if you're rich, you can sit there and buy all of them if you've got the money. And now things are a little bit different, where I've been lucky enough to be gifted consoles over the years, and I find myself fortunate that I've been able to play the new, say, Nintendo consoles, or the new Xbox consoles, or the new PlayStation consoles. And although there's a lot of things that they all have in common, they all have things that are also different, and they all have unique things to bring to the table. And I know I'm being very fortunate to have a Switch, even though I don't have the OLED one, and having a Series X and a PS5. So I know I'm very, very fortunate in being able to play those consoles, whereas some people, you know, you have to pick one, or you have none. So as I said, I know I'm very, very fortunate in being able to do that. But I'm not one of those ones where, oh, I'm pro Nintendo, or I'm pro Xbox, or I'm pro PlayStation. I mean, there's some people that are, and then that's what they choose. Maybe they prefer that format, and that's fine. But I'm not gonna, even if I did prefer one, and then that was it, I'm not gonna crap on something else. That's really not my style. I mean, everyone's got their own things that tailor to their needs. Just like when you got people who are Android or iPhones users, and then they sit there and then they're arguing, oh, that one's better than the other. And at the end of the day, it's what you think is better for you, whether it's Android or iPhones. And it's where you see these fanboys and again these media outlets sitting there and arguing, and it's just utterly ridiculous. And that's why I try to. I mean, I'm not 100% perfect, but I try to think of myself as being honest and kind of like biased and unbiased, should I say? Where I'm gonna sit there and I'll give anything a fair crack of the whip to sit there to see how something is. And that's just the way. Maybe that's the way I am. Maybe I know not all people think that way, but yeah, I just wish these media, the media, would stop putting their agenda and what they want to succeed and what they want to fail. I'm an optimist, and I don't think it's going to change. But that for me is the why with social media now, where I've taken a back seat on it now, because I'm tired of seeing the same people now, and I think it's just made people worse. In a sense, as I said, where you see people going, oh, I think that's crap, I knew it was going to fail, it's utter rubbish, I knew it was going to be crap, terrible, oh, it's woke, blah, 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 blah. Some of these people need to get off the internet, and they need to go out in the real world, take in the fresh air, and live their life in the real world. And maybe they might enjoy it. Anyway, I'm sorry for the length of this video. I wasn't expecting it to be as long as it was, but I needed to there's a lot on my chest that I wanted to get off, and hopefully, I mean, people will enjoy the video. As I said before, I'm not one of these ones where I'm paid by somebody. As I said before, I love Sony, I love Nintendo, I love Microsoft, I love DC, I love Marvel, etc, 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 right? And I'm always going to be 100% honest with you. There was even a time when I had a problem with DC, where in the comics, the way they treated Wally West, because that's the Flash I grew up on, and DC treated him like crap. Obviously, they made people know the history of when, obviously, when they brought Brian back and they got rid of Wally West. When they eventually did Brian back and turned him into a killer. Eventually, they had to retcon that. They've treated Robin in the past like crap. They've treated Superboy like crap. The Connor Kent clone, the clone Superboy, where they treated him like, and then that wasn't particularly kind of very great. And I was very outspoken on social media, even though I'm complaining that I don't like it, but I just didn't like what DC did. And even with the Carl Rayner Green Lantern, the way they treated him. Although I'm a big fan of, like, say, Hal Jordan, John Stewart, and some of the other Green Lanterns that they've introduced, old and new. But the way they treated him like crap. So even as a DC fan, I could turn and say, you know what? I don't like what they did there, and I'm not going to sit there and be a DC fan and go, all right, I'll just agree with everything that they've, what they're exactly doing. I will sit there and I will criticise it. As I said before, those that know me know how passionate I've been about the character of Wally West, because that was the modern age Flash that I kind of grew up with, and I may even do some videos in him with the comics of him that I've got, but obviously they're going to be old comics, and that's the reason why I was so passionate about that character. And then when you see a company treat a character like that like crap in terms of what they did, it's really kind of heartbreaking, and, you know, getting very angry in terms of what they did to him. So I'm not going to sit there and be, just because I'm a fan of a company, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to go along with it. It's the same thing that you see with, obviously, the stuff that's going on with the Snyderverse, where you get some of the Snyderverse fans. I get where they're coming from, and I did enjoy the films, but sometimes that's how things work out, things move on. You still got the movies. Who knows, maybe in the future things might change, but it's just the way that people behave and kind of carry on, which I'm not kind of a fan of, so to speak. But yeah, that's my video on the agenda of these media outlets and how they can be biased and creating cancel cultures and outrage. So yeah, I hope people enjoy this video. As I said before, I only speak, although this video is long, I'm only speaking from the heart, not scripted or anything. So it's just what I feel in my mind and my heart and about certain subject matters. I don't like to get too political, as I said before, and I want people to enjoy my YouTube content. I don't want to be decisive in terms of my thing. That's why I do YouTube. It's something that I love. I've always been creative when it comes to dancing, music, drawing and painting, comics and sci-fi. Always been a very creative person, and I just want to, you know, share my passions with other people. So that's all it's been about. So yeah, I hope people enjoy this video.